Good morning, good afternoon, learners. It is indeed a very pleasant day that we have today, and it is our pleasure and immense pride that we are bringing you the first webinar of the January 2025 session of the certificate program in environmental sustainability. As you all know, this is a 8-week course run on XII platform, and from time to time we keep inviting eminent personalities in various fields related to the various subjects that we touch upon in our course, and request them to deliver lectures and talks. Today it is no different, and we are indeed very fortunate that we have a very eminent expert in the field of education. In fact, not one but two very eminent experts in the field of from the field of education, in the form of Dr. Shakila Shamsu and Professor Mohan Menon. Our key resource person today is Dr. Shakila Shamsu, and I'm sure all of you would be knowing a great deal about Madam. Madam, in fact, has more than 25 years of working experience, both as a teacher, as an academic, first in the University of Mumbai and then in Indira Gandhi National Open University. Then Madam joined the Planning Commission and worked under its auspices for more than 14 years. And one of the significant highlights in Madam's tenure at the Ministry of Education was that she was instrumental in framing the National Education Policy 2020, which was indeed an epoch-making event in the educational history of our country. And Madam also was the secretary to the committee that drafted the National Education Policy, and also actively contributed to the formulation of this very important document. In fact, prior to this, Madam was also OSD in the Ministry of Education on invitation, and then joint advisor education, the Planning Commission, and again on deputation. Madam has a wide range of interests, which ranges from educational planning, policy making, implementation, faculty development, teacher training, ICT, enabled education, open and distance learning, and much, much more. And Madam holds a PhD degree in distance education, and she's also the gold medalist in Masters in Political Science program. Madam also holds a PG diploma in distance education and also a degree in law. Madam has also contributed immensely to academic literature, and there have been several articles in international journals and books which have been contributed by Madam. Madam was also involved in the preparation of the 11th and 12th 5-year plans. Several government project reports have been executed under her auspices, and Madam has also delivered several lectures at national and international conferences. Madam has also been a member of various committees constituted by the Government of India, state governments, USIEF, and Madam was also in the National Selection Committee for the Fulbright program. Madam is also a recipient of several awards, which includes and is not limited to the Leaders of Decade in Academia Women Economic Forum Award, then SP Mukherjee Commendation on Education. Then Madam is also one of the honorees among 100 Muslim women honorees in Kerala. Further, Madam has also taken up a number of activities and is also very busy these days. Madam is a honorary advisor education for the Center of Public Policy and Research, Kochi. She's on the Governing Council of India MUN and Pan India UN Body for Climate Action, and Madam is also on the advisory group for advocacy group for NEP, and also participates in several discussions, webinars, conferences, etc. related to this particular field. So it is my proud privilege on behalf of the entire team of the Certificate in Environmental Sustainability and Trivandrum to welcome Madam to this session. We are indeed privileged to have you here. Thank you. We have Professor Mohan B. Menon, sir, who is not a stranger to any of you. One of the webinars conducted with him as the resource person is already part of your syllabus. So you would have already gone through that. So you know what kind of a speaker and thought leader is Professor Menon. Sir was formerly the Deputy Vice Chancellor of Wausan Open University, Malaysia. Sir was also the former director of the School of Education of IGNOU. Sir has been the chairman of numerous committees, and one such very important committee was a recent one set up in the state of Kerala on the implementation of Integrated Teacher Education Program, or ITEP. Sir was also the director of the UN Education Program for Palestinian refugees. Sir has also been contributing immensely on various discussion platforms, several conferences, several symposia, not only in India, but across the globe. Sir has also been a part of many implementation committees of various programs, including FDPs, and other training programs in universities, not only in India, but across the world. Sir was also a program officer at the Commonwealth of Learning, and that experience has indeed helped Sir to, in fact, broaden up the spectrum of thought that he includes in various activities that he involves in. So, sir, it is our proud privilege to have you once again, sir, with us on this program. And I'm sure the discussions that we'll be having once Madam completes her presentation will be of immense help to all the learners. I also have with me a team member of our course team, Dr. Sindhu P. Nair, who is also the regional director, a senior regional director of IGNOU Regional Center, Vadakara. And we are also joined by Deputy Director, Dr. Prasita Unnikrishnan from IGNOU RC Cochin. So it is my proud privilege to welcome all of you to this session. And last but not the least, I am also privileged to welcome all the participants of the certificate course in environmental sustainability. We have been indeed humbled by the success that the course have been having over the years. And till date, more than 35,000 students have joined this course since its inception. So kind of support that we have been receiving from you is immense, and we are extremely thankful for the continued support that we have been receiving every semester for this course. So without much ado, let me once again welcome the distinguished participants, and I request Dr. Shakila Shamsu to take over from us and deliver the keynote address. Over to you, ma'am.
So thank you, Dr. Rajesh, and salutations to Professor Mohan Menon and to Dr. Sindhu and Prasita, and to all the learners of this program. And I must congratulate all the learners for actually being very sensitive and responsive to a very critical area in terms of environmental sustainability. In fact, the title of the course itself should be one which sort of incites the interest of every young person in the 21st century, because we are going through a phase where we are seeing a deceleration in many aspects relating to environment, and we are all aware that it is only through the education and awareness that we may be able to sort of mitigate many of the damages that environment is currently facing, be it in terms of our flora and the fauna, or in terms of the forest, in terms of the water resources, in terms of wildlife that we have, in terms of energy, in all these aspects. So let me tell you, it's about 2:41 now, and I would like to segmentize my talk into 3 or 4 aspects. One is, of course, the title that I am talking about is talking about environmental education in the context of the national education policy, which Dr. Rajesh has just referred to as someone who has been a part of it. So it becomes in the very first segment to understand a little bit about why we are talking about environmental education within the context of NEP, in terms of just giving you some insights into the context that we are talking about. The second would be in terms of understanding the main features of NEP, and I'm not going to give a very elaborate elucidation of the main features of NEP. I'm only trying to highlight certain features of the NEP so that we are able to contextualize environmental education within the NEP, and how does it actually have to resonate in terms of individual efforts and institutional efforts, and in terms of, let us say, faculty and their approaches towards looking at the whole gamut of issues that relate to environmental sustainability. So, coming to the first context, I think the fact that the national education policy has come out in the 21st century on 29th of July 2020. This year is basically the fifth year of the policy in this July, and the first policy that we say that has come out in the 21st century. So earlier policies of 1968 or 1986 may not have really given a lot of emphasis on environment, because I think during the 20th century one has not really seen the massive climatic events that we are seeing today, or we are not maybe even aware of what would be the threats that environment would be facing, and the consciousness and the awareness of it has become more prominent in the 21st century. So that itself was one of the factors that the policy would have taken into account, that the changes in the coming in this century, which is likely to have far reaching implications for environment, for sustainability, is something that the policy could not have chosen to ignore. The second is the fact that the policy has come out again because it is in the 21st century, where the multilateral agencies like the United Nations became very conscious in terms of the sustainable development goals. So we started with the Millennium Development Goals and the unfinished agenda of the Millennium Development Goals, which were between the period of 2001 to 2015, got recast into new developmental goals, which was sort of nomenclature that we have given it is sustainable development goals. In terms of looking at how do we create sustainable societies, and to do and create sustainable societies, what should be the focus areas that we talk about. So the sustainable development goals, which are 17 in number, look at a varied range of areas. But the primary three P's that they're talking about in terms of the planet, the people, and the partnerships, which means when you talk about the planet and the people, the need for them to coexist through collaborative arrangements and through partnerships become very important. So the second reason why we are looking at NEP, or why NEP would have looked at environment, is the contextualization at not just the national level and not just the thematic level, but also the global requirement that we create peaceful societies, and we create sustainable societies which have greater resilience, and which have got resilience to many, many aspects that seem to threaten forms of life, that seems to threaten the clean air we breathe, the kind of pollution that can happen, and so on. And the third important reason why we talk about environment and its sustainability in the context of NEP is a growing influence, and I think invasion of technology that has been happening. And while on one side, technologies like ICTs have helped us in many ways in the ease of doing many things that we do as academics or as students or as organizations and so on, it has also, with the rise of the disruptive technologies, resulted in many things that seem to be threatening the way we sort of deal with nature and the way we approach issues that deal with natural phenomena that happens itself. And therefore, again, when you talk about environment and sustainability, this becomes a very important reality that the national education policy had to take into account. Having said this much, I would just give you a brief insight into the national education policy, because in terms of its coverage, it's not that it is looking only at a certain subsector of education. All education policies by nature, we tend to be very comprehensive, and they tend to cover all aspects of education, starting with the school education, looking at higher education, technical education, teacher education, vocational education, adult education, agricultural education, legal education, medical education. All these aspects are looked at by a comprehensive policy. So many of you may have seen through that very crisp document of 66 pages, which looks at education in one single organic continuum, starting with the school education and then going on into other areas of education, including, as I said, all the areas. And there are cross cutting themes of open and distance learning, technology in education, language and education, research and innovation. All these have sort of been weaved together in a very cohesive and coherent manner, so as to bring about recommendations to transform India and transform our students and our teachers and our educational institutions to become globally very competent and to meet with all the challenges that the 21st century poses before us. In that context, what it had done was that it started looking at a lot of transformations. And that is why I would describe the national education policy as not being merely a reformative exercise, but being a very transformative exercise, because it has sort of brought about, I would say, disruptions, not only in the structures and the processes, but the entire teaching learning paradigm, and looking at many, many new developments that impinge upon the quality of education. So, in terms of the goals that NEP talked about, in terms of achieving certain articulated goals, we are looking at five clear cut goals of enhancing access, ensuring equity, improving quality, ensuring affordability, and instilling a sense of accountability. Now, these five goals are not to be seen at, let us say, as varying from one another, and they should not be mutually conflicting with one another, but needs to be looked at in a very mutually complementary manner, to the extent that increasing access should not reduce or should not enhance disparities or should not reduce quality, and so on. So these were the goals, and we articulated some 22 cardinal principles so as to ensure that the recommendations that are made at different sectors are not at variance with one another. And so you will not find an inconsistency in the recommendations of NEP, where on one side we are talking about some change in the school education, which is diametrically conflicting with something that we have said in higher education or in agriculture education, and so on. So, in school education, we looked at a new paradigm, and that I'm only mentioning because I would like you to, I would like in my third part of it to talk about where does environment fit into that paradigm. And that is the approach to learning and curricula in terms of choices that learners would make has to be seen from an angle of age appropriate, and that age appropriate, developmentally appropriate learning. And so we divided it into stages, which we call between ages 3 to 8 as foundational, which is at the very early stages of early childhood care and education. Then the preparatory between 8 to 11, which is an initiation into formal learning. 11 to 14 being the middle stage, which is covering largely the classes from 6 to 8. And then from 9 to 12, which covers the current nomenclature of secondary and higher secondary as only the secondary stage. So it's foundational, preparatory, middle, and secondary, being coinciding with the age of the learners in the 3 to 8, 8 to 11, 11 to 14, and 14 to 18. And then we look at higher education, which is 18 onwards. And within higher education, of course, we are embedding the whole idea of technical education. Now, this paradigm that we talked about, we said in school education, we are talking about a number of things like having 10 days bagless. We are saying that we will remove the so called traditional ways of dividing subjects and courses that children opt into curricular, co curricular, and extracurricular, and allow for all capacities of children to be treated as a potential that needs to be optimized, and that a learning ecosystem must allow a child who is good at music, or must allow a child who is good at, let's say, experimentation, or a child who is good at debating, or a child who is good at some craft, which may be carpentry or so, can all have potentials that can be sort of nurtured and leading to excellence. And that should not be treated as something that is secondary to the core subjects, which we normally think in our mind as math, science, and so on. And coming further on, therefore, we talked in terms of interning students with craftsmen in the villages to get them a feel of the sensitivity of agriculture, of various crafts that deal with natural resources, and the need that these are very, very significant to develop a sensitivity to the environment itself. It's a reflection of trying to say that we need to inculcate in our students what the Article 51 says in terms of being able to improve the environment and to respect all forms of life and value them in terms of their significance for the entire society, to be having a very accommodative kind of an ecosystem. It goes on further in the school stages. I'll come to that. So we talked about a new curricular framework, and I'll say about how environment features within that. But in higher education, we the main recommendation has been on a holistic, integrated, multidisciplinary education, where again the shift has been from silo-based degrees, which we are conventionally used to having a more integrated view of all disciplines, which allows for a combination of various categories of courses, some which we call as common courses, some are the core disciplines, some are the multidisciplinary courses, the ability enhancement courses, the skill enhancement courses, and the value added courses. Now, all this is, I can't really talk about it at a very major level because I would like to contextualize environment education within this. Now, in the school education, I talked about a new national curriculum framework for school education. The fact that in the class 6, we are doing away with these disciplinary boundaries resulted in clear indications, articulated paragraphs in the national education policy, which talks in terms of not only bringing about a sensitivity to environment by the children through sort of focused activities, but also in terms of getting them to do a lot of field based activities. You see, you cannot sit in the air conditioned classrooms that some of our urban schools have, or in rural areas where there is no infrastructure but within the physical spaces, and talk about environment. It is about going out and understanding the environment, whether it is in terms of how crops are cultivated, what are the damages that crops face in terms of the climatic actions and the events that happen, maybe less rain or more rain, what are the kinds of harm that our crops are facing because of the lack of proper fertilizers or the lack of pesticides. All this is not to be understood in a theoretical sense by being in the classrooms. So it became very important that the pedagogical tools that we wanted to deploy for children to understand about environment, for children to understand about sustainability, for children to understand about the significance of forests that are there and that have a lot of positive impact. It became important that we deploy the kind of pedagogies that brings them into real life activities by actually going out, doing field trips, conducting actual hands-on experiential learning. So environmental studies in the school education can only happen if we are able to have a curricular framework which dovetails or incorporates within itself the need for having hands on experiential learning. And then the issues that come about have to be highlighted for children to have discussions and debates rather than merely a theoretical exposure to understanding something at a theoretical level or a conceptual level, that we know, for example, that use of plastic. But how do you actually help the student to understand what are the alternate forms of plastic? What is it available in our natural resources that will allow us to have, instead of, let us say, plastic plates, that you have the kind of bamboo plates that you have, and so on. This can come about only when that approach changes. So the NEP in the in the sector dealing with the school education, at the first, talked about environment as being a critical part of the curricular framework, talked about enhancing the awareness of the children to issues relating to environment across a range, from climate to water to pollution, air pollution that happens, to the flora and the fauna, the vanishing categories of the wild animals and the birds that are happening, and how we need, they're all the endangered species, and how we need to protect them and ensure that they continue, so that they are they're there for eternal, for a certain longer period. We may not be able to stem, maybe they are becoming a sort of a vanishing species, but at least that we can help them to be preserved on all these aspects, including energy. So when you have a declaration that India would reduce carbon footprint by as late as 2070, personally, it's a very long period ahead. We must be looking at what sorts of energy sources should be there, which are renewable and which are helping people to have the proper energy in terms of not creating pollution, but confining itself to creating clean energy, as we call it. So this is not, you may not find actual references to it within the 66-page policy document, but you have actual examples being given within the national curriculum framework for school education, which looked at 8 curricular areas. It talks about science education, social science education, language education, mathematics education, physical education, vocational education, art education, and interdisciplinary areas. Within the interdisciplinary areas, we are looking at gender studies, we are looking at technology, and we are looking at environment. And within environment, when we are looking at environmental studies at a foundational level between ages 3 to 8, you don't talk about climate at that stage. So the activities that we have listed out in the curricular framework all relate to making children aware. For example, children play with clay. Now, the clay that they need to use should be something that is not harmful in terms of the plastic content or the microplastics that may be present. The kind of toys that they use at that stage, the whole idea of having indigenous toys and not using harmful products like plastic and so on, have picked up as part of the NEP within the kind of learning resources and the kind of toys and so on that children at that age need to be handling with. And so the kind of activities that we build around it are all at that foundational stage related to that aspect of environment. When we come a little further to the preparatory stage, the level goes up a little bit in terms of making children participate in activities where they talk about environmental related issues in terms of doing artwork, in when playing sports, for example, the kind of materials that are used, those things started building up. But the emphasis becomes much with greater rigor and greater seriousness, and looking at major issues both from the middle stage that is getting initiated, where we are introducing, as I said, that 10 days bagless, so that children go out into the villages. And if you can recall your own times when you did the National Social Service, NSS kind of activity, when you're going out into the villages and going out into the community, the important thing is to understand that you cannot bring about environmental changes without bringing in the community. So the role of the community, the role of the larger stakeholders within the society, coming together with the schools, with the teachers, with the school students in that bagless environment, is the at the middle stage, coming in with a lot of other activities of that kind. And at secondary stage, we are looking at real issues in terms of climate mitigation, in terms of financing for climate mitigation, in terms of collaborating with nations, looking at the making children aware about how the global north, which is using the maximum form of energy, needs to be doing financing for the global south. Now these come up at the secondary stage, and which gets more magnified as we go into the higher education space. The NCF, if many of you would like to read, actually gives you real examples with activities at different stages, so that you're pitching in environmental education and making children aware in their age appropriate manner by involving them into a number of activities. And I would really feel that NEP has been merely giving you a very broad statement, but the national curriculum framework and the kind of activities that it has talked about has gone a step further in actually having you giving you functional tips into how to go about making children aware, how to make teachers empowered to do that, how do institutions go beyond conventional spaces of classrooms to talk about how environmental sustainability can be appreciated and understood, and where they become the ambassadors, the students becoming the ambassadors for many of these causes of environment. Now, it is equally important at this stage, before I go into the higher education and how we looked at environment there, to understand that the challenges of environment, whether it is in terms of non-availability of potable water, or whether it is in terms of uh, challenges in availability of uh, uh, let us say pesticides for the crops and so on, always affects those who are what we may call marginalized. So, women, for example, are the greatest sufferers of all this environmental degradation that is happening. Therefore, the women are the ones who are traveling miles to get drinking water, or the women are the ones who are struggling on in the fields and in the farms. Similarly, those living who are economically backward and whose farmlands are, if you see about farmer suicides, it is not the well-to-do farmer in Punjab who is doing that. It is the rural farmer in across the rural India who do that, because they have small land holdings, and any kind of damage that happens because of the climatic is impacting them. So the double index of disadvantage is something that the children must be made sensitive about. And to make that children aware about it, we have within the teacher education, we have included that environment studies would be a very important vertical that pre-service teacher education would be focusing upon. And in-service teacher education, those who are having training programs, also a greater thrust on preparing teachers to understand the current issues related to environment, relating to sustainability, relating to climate, relating to forest, relating the whole issue of, for I am just going out of it to say, the whole issue that you saw in Manipur between the tribals and the rest of the people is not more of a is more about sustainability. It's more about the resources, the forest resources that you have. And India is home to diverse geographical let us say environments, and these diverse geographical environments pose additional challenges. So the complexities of looking at environment in the context of education and advocacy and awareness building is one action, but the way in which our educational institutions can take the lead by making our students becoming the lead ambassadors for various causes. Dr. Rajesh said that I am on the governing council of India MUN. We actually nominate schools to come forward and designate children as forest ambassadors. Their job is to keep planting trees so that all the deforestation that has happened is mitigated through a lot of afforestation efforts. Now, these are the kind of things that schools need to start becoming a part of. And India MUN, I'm just saying that affiliate schools and colleges and universities to become a part of this action, which the NEP has provided there as an enabler. Now, in the space of higher education, we have talked about, as I said, a holistic, multidisciplinary, integrated undergraduate program. And one category of course relates to common courses. So the common courses are the ones where we are talking about not only the fundamental duties, which is a part of it, and at higher education, a greater empathy from the learners in understanding the issues relating to climate, relating to the forest life, relating to the mitigation, climate financing, all these becomes very important, and also understanding the global implications of it in terms of how we are divided globally by the global north and the global south. These all become very important as part of understanding it as a common course. And that is also going in further, because environmental studies is a cross cutting discipline. It can be there for students who are doing it with social sciences. It can be there for children doing it with linguistics. It can be there for children doing it with engineering. And therefore, it is there in sciences, social sciences, applied sciences. It is there in medical education. It's there in agricultural education. How do you look at the legal education, the entire legal frameworks? So, the United Nations framework for climate action and so on, the legalities of those documents that are coming out. We have to look at all these aspects so that within each of these spheres, you weave in environment in the most relevant and the appropriate manner. And by allowing that interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary undergraduate programs, we have actually created opportunities for higher education institutions to be able to embed environmental studies not just as a value added course, but as a part of the core education, which is either the core subject or which could be a multidisciplinary subject. So, along with this, it is equally important to think in terms of the skills. So, when you look at environmental education, what are those subjects that come in terms of the skilling part of it? So, a lot of foods today that we transport through the logistics is requiring a lot of preservatives. The kind of gases that are used, how harmful they are. Today itself, the newspaper carries in terms of the drugs that we have used, the generic drugs being more harmful. On all these areas, the high end kind of research on one side, and that comes in under the ambit of technical or medical or biotechnology and so on. And the other end, the kind of skills that students must be sort of trained, so that these are the new and emerging areas. So, looking at environment and sustainability, the need for greenhouses, the need for looking at new skills that are coming up, how can technology come in to help us to get a lot of data? And the data becomes very important, because only then you can have future planning. Unless you have the data, you are not able to look at the future planning. So, water bodies which are highly polluted, how do we reduce? So, you have a huge blue sky research project on the study of the Ganges. But you need to understand that it has to come about through IITs and many other high end institutions. Now, these are all sort of indicated within the policy, not as specifically as maybe I'm trying to tell it to you. But when you say that the undergraduate program and the master's program are all, including the doctoral programs, are encouraging multidisciplinarity, one needs to situate the linkages between environmental education to legal education to technical education to high end research to skilling to social issues, and looking at a framework which is able to accept new ideas, so that we are not talking in cliche languages. We are not talking in terms, yeah, we have to protect the world, we have to ensure that energy is there. These are all these are all outdated. We need to go and actually have action, and you need to think in terms of actually rejuvenating what are seeming to be threatened. And that cannot happen merely by a kind of, let us say, what would I say, a poster boy approach. You can't do that. But if you make tell children that you have to have a poster competition, you have climate hackathons. I'm talking about higher education levels. Poster competitions can happen even in school education. But in terms of higher education, can we have hackathons? The India MUN, we conduct climate hackathons. We conduct model uh, parliamentary committees where children come together in college and actually start discussing about climate, like a COP conference kind of a thing. These are the kind of things. So you have a lot of scope. And since you all are pursuing a certificate course in environmental sustainability, I would urge each one of you to also visualize yourself, having heard what the NEP is trying to provide opportunities. How do you take this into the institutions within which you are? And in entire all this exercise, the need for faculty to move beyond their, their regular brief, that I am an associate professor of, let's say, sociology, and not looking at sociology without understanding a certain aspect of environment. Or I am an assistant professor of, let's say, civil engineering or instrumentation engineering. How do I look at environment in that angle? So all faculty, irrespective of the discipline that they are, must be able to weave in an aspect of environmental awareness in terms of ensuring sustainability, looking at the larger sustainable development goals, whether it is the SDG 4 targets, whether it's the climate targets of SDG 13, or whether it is the climate action that is there from SDG 17, in terms of how do we have governance systems. So the leadership of educational institutions, the governance, the governing bodies of higher education institutions must have a very collegiate and collaborative view in which they come forward to address many issues related to environment. And why I'm harping about collaboration is because no institution can exist as an island today, and it needs to collaborate with other institutions of a similar kind or of a completely different kind, to look at cross cutting themes like environment and technology, or looking at sustainability and social exclusion, or these themes. And then also looking in terms of how art influences it, how do sports come into the way of it. These all are, I think, a very vast canvas, a very vast canvas which we can paint with so many colors. And the national education policy has sort of created a very enabling ecosystem, allowing for us to innovate, allowing for us to go beyond the standard straight-jacketed ways in which we have been thinking, to really explore cross-cutting, interconnected, what seemingly seems to be even unconnected areas for a larger cause in terms of trying to protect the planet. So that is why when I said the SDGs, the 17 SDG goals talk about people, planet, and partnerships. It is, you looked at it at a micro level, it is the students, the teachers, the parents, the community, the industry, the research institutions, the local craftsmen, the local artists, all of them coming together so as to be looking at the larger goal of trying to be able to protect the planet Earth. And I think the national education policy has taken cognizance of it, has been very mindful in all its recommendations. The national curriculum framework for higher education, for school education, has also factored for the foundational, preparatory, middle, and secondary stages. And the 4-year undergraduate program has also embedded many of these things. I may mention one aspect, that universities which are like open universities of IGNOU, from where I come from, we have been promoting certificate courses of this kind way ahead, I mean, way back, that it has already been there as a certificate course. Now you have more and more institutions that are offering it. And the fact that you have joined a MOOCs course itself shows that you are very, I would say, people who would like to invest your time into doing a course which has got major implications for the human world itself. And that humanistic spirit is something that I would say hats off to. And I think you must go further beyond just taking this for the sake of a certificate, to be actually committed in terms of investing your time and energy and action, so that we are able to have a very sustainable society where dignity is maintained, where the environment and all its forms of life is maintained, and that we keep replenishing and protecting our planet for future generations to come. I think I would stop over here, and let us see if you have some questions. I am not too aware whether that comes in through chat. Dr. Rajesh may be able to help me out. But anyway, thank you, and God bless you all, and wish you all the very best in this course that you are doing. And congratulations once again to not only the course coordinator and his team members, but also to all the learners for having taken up a very, very pertinent course that is offered under the Swayam platform. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for that very, very comprehensive analysis of what the NEP has in store for environmental education. You have not only restricted yourselves to the broad area of NEP, but also gone into the functional areas such as multidisciplinarity, collaboration, governance, role of educational institutions, and various other aspects as well. It has been the most enlightening discussion that we have had in this particular field, because this is a certain niche area where much discussion often does not take place, that is with relation to environment and the NEP. But you have given, you have not only done justice to the area of discussion, but also broaden our horizons quite a lot in this regard. Thank you, ma'am, for that very, very explicit presentation. Now it's time for discussion, and before I open the floor for questions from our students and viewers, I would first of all request Mohan Menon sir to come in and present his views on this subject. Sir, you're online, sir? I think, sir, please. I think you are muted, sir. Yeah, okay. No problem.
But Dr. Rajesh, after an excellent presentation by Dr. Shakila, which not only touched the development of the whole thinking of environmental education leading to sustainability, and since the 70s, remember that the Tibet Convention is the one which first came out with that, which led to a lot of activities that the different countries took up in this, and which initially we had the Millennium Development Goals, but at that time the sustainability was not an issue, which led to the SDGs, as Dr. Shakila said. But before I go into anything that I want to talk about, not talk about what she has presented, because it was excellently done, and also the NEP, how NEP has really focused on these concerns, which has been there even earlier. Because I remember when the first the SDGs was launched in the world, that happened to be in Ahmedabad, which happened in the Center for Environment Education. That was in 2015 when SDGs, and now it is 10 years. But of course, we have not achieved to the extent that was anticipated at that time. And then now they say it is 2030. I always believe that it is not that we are not going to achieve it 100%. And so it is not that achieving is not what is important, but the path towards achieving that is more important. So all that was done, that even NEP has to be seen in that regard, that all those efforts made by NEP and the recommendations made and hopefully that will be implemented in the school system as well as higher education, will surely contribute towards this. So that's fine. There are two ways that I can give my observation. Maybe I can give first my initial observations, and if people have questions coming from our students, then of course that my concern basically has been is somehow when we talk about environment education, we take into account only is the formal education. Not that we have not done outside that. We have done a lot of things outside that. I remember even the CEE had not only for formal education, they had education for the urban development, education for industries, and such groups were there. I don't know what the situation today, because CEE is not in a very high profile these days. It is a little low profile due to reason I don't know. But so my involvement with that institution was mainly in the area of teacher education, and something I still consider one of the great achievements that we had in the Commonwealth of Learning was coming out with the Green Teacher course of the of CEE, and that was focusing on not only the teacher but also the school system as a whole. And we coined that somehow, I don't know who came out with that, the Green Teacher. And that still is going on. I could see that on that still offered online as well as face to face. So that is there. But the issue has been mainly all these efforts that we are making in education, formal education, including the school teachers. To what extent that can really make a difference in the concerns that we have of sustainability? There are many articles, many people have written about it, and they blame mainly the industries and also the international leaders, the so-called leaders of international country leaders. They have been only talking about it more in meeting after meeting that happens every year in different countries, including one we had a year back in India. Good things are talked about. Always it is concludes with a declaration that happens, and it is supposed to be monitored, and it is monitored by UNESCO. UNESCO has taken it up for monitoring the sustainable development, to what extent it has been achieved. And there it is. I think that it goes into a cold storage maybe for some time, and the next meeting comes. The reason has been mainly that that it is not as simple as that you can educate the children. They are very sensitive to that, and I can see that they can easily be changed with all the efforts that we are making, not only at the lower classes but also later, and can develop a youth who can really be the force that can lead to a change for future. Because when I remember that diagram, which was very nice, I think it is UNESCO which came out with when we came from Millennium Development Goals to Sustainable Development Goals. Three aspects of development were focused. Earlier, environment was not there, so the development was mainly social development and economic development. And so when at that time it was equitable. Yes, people talked about equitable development. So haves and have-nots have to be taken into consideration. That took care of the social aspects also. It is only after the environment aspect factor of that interface, the social, the environment, and the economic, three things came into picture. One is equity, whether all are getting their bread and butter, and if that is the main issue, or some are becoming richer and richer every day, and others have become poorer and poorer every other day. Even if the GDP is very high, the per capita income also may show very high, but the difference is so much that it poorer. There are more poor people today probably in the world than it was about 10 years back. This is what the world literature says on this issue. Why this has happened is that we went into economic development without considering environment, and because unless it is bearable for the system, bearable means that for the ecosystem to contain that, it will affect the system. Now, a simple example we can take from even the Kerala context. We have been talking about the elephants coming from the forest and attacking the people, and why suddenly elephants have become so ferocious that they have to come, and why we should really look into that, and any amount of politics that we play within the country, within the state, and between the state and the center is not going to stop that elephant coming here, because the reason is they have gone, the environment is so much affected in that area that they don't have water. And for economic development or economic revenue, that revenue getting out of that, most of the places of the forest has been put for economically viable or economically profitable trees like eucalyptus, for example. One example is eucalyptus. You go to the Wayanad area and all this, you'll find a lot of eucalyptus trees. Of course, rubber was there earlier. That again was something which I'm sure all elephants disliked so much that it did not want to eat a rubber tree. It never would like to. Similarly with the eucalyptus tree too. So what can the elephants do? It can only pass through that and get into the next where people are there to get to the rest stop, or as Arikomban did, or in some other place to have the food. See, I am not going in detail with that. This is just one example, but this is exactly what is happening in many countries. It is not only in Kerala or the states of India. Now, if this is the way that we look at development, economic development being the prime focus, and nobody is able to touch that, that is related to the affecting the environment. Biodiversity is something which is absolutely not really taken into account. You see, biodiversity is basically the nature's way of, whether it is human beings or whether it is fauna, flora, whatever it is, biodiversity. However beautiful that the tree can be and the flowers can be, you may not like to have the whole tree, such trees all over the place. You will not. There has to be a biodiversity. That's the reason why we also focus on cultural diversity. It is very much related to biodiversity. Now, it is not that one type of culture which came up in one country is more important than cultures which have come up in other parts. It's a politics that I'm talking about. But it is basically, that's also an issue. Cultural diversity and biodiversity, here we are more into biodiversity. People, if you don't sustain that, then all the ecosystem and the food chain and many other things will be affected. And that's exactly what is happening. Now, who will build these gaps? Will they do it in the school when they're educated? Yes, they have to be aware. And I think a lot of good work has happened, as in the talk also by Dr. Shakila, that in the school education and college education, lot of things have happened. It is not that we have not done. That's the area probably we have done more. So, with of course the penalties and all coming to industries have also become very sensitive to this happening. But their main focus is economic development. And if they are not controlled by the governing structures, including the country leadership, whether India or any other country, that will continue to be. Now, God can only say what will happen to USA with Musk and Trump coming together. We don't know really what sort of policies will be there. The other day, when the Trump announced that we will continue to have plastic, this thing, we will not destroy. Why not we have plastics? He made a statement. Now, if a head president of the United States of America make a statement like that, what sort of impact that will have in the whole industries? What sort of impact that will have in all the time we were building up the whole environment awareness and sustainability and how we have to go about. So I am actually a little pessimistic about the whole thing. I am not very hopeful that we will achieve, and we are even going towards that direction. We are actually going, going down, retrogressive effect. I'm not talking about the national policy because we have done a great job, and I think that has really captured the many of the developments that has been happening before the policy also, and captured it with, and multidisciplinary, which was very which was highlighted, is the key stone for that. Because if you are multidisciplinary, everybody has to. Otherwise, engineers will only think about engineering, and and that is happening today. An engineer comes out of the BTech without any idea of the social concerns. They won't be even sensitive to that. Unfortunately, now that would change. Hopefully, that changes. And one, I just conclude with one point. One of the things that the responsibility that higher education teachers as well as the students have, it's not enough that they be aware of that. I think they will have to protest when it comes to things happening in the environment. Protest word may not be a right word, maybe, but they will have to really come out as a force and telling, no, we are not going this to making this happen. We are not going to allow the distillery to come in Palghat. I mean, I'm just giving an example. I'm not any party here. But we will not allow that. Who is going to do that? If at all the changes have to happen, it has to come from our students. And the students are the one who are forceful. And and teachers have to motivate that, not for wrong purposes, but for right purposes. So the responsibility and role of the higher education teacher is very, very, very critical today, that they have to conduct such scenarios in the classroom itself, to take up such case studies and discuss and all these, and not case studies like fictional ones, actual ones. What is going to happen? Let them take up that the distillery thing and say, if distillery is coming up, what is going to happen? Let us discuss in that. What sort of discussion happens? Such discussions does it happen in our educational institutions? No. Maybe in some of the, if it's happening, it's really good. Yeah, I'll stop here. I'm sorry, whatever I had to say, I put it in a. This is one advantage when you become very old. Also, you can talk very.
Thank you, sir. In fact, your intervention is most welcome because it makes us think in different ways as well. So thank you for those very nicely encapsulated line of thoughts, sir. And in fact, I would also like to welcome our regional director from RC IZON, Dr. Jalja Umari, who is very much part of our environmental sustainability team. And definitely, I would like to request the patience of both Dr. Sindhu and Dr. Jalja, because I think we will first take up a few questions which have been posted by our learners, and then move to hear from both of them. Okay, this is the first question that we have. In what ways can environmental education be made more interdisciplinary under NEP 2020?
Yeah, Dr. Rajesh, I saw those questions. I think we could club up a few of them together, given the paucity of time, unless, of course, we can go beyond 3:45. One, of
Okay,
course, was...
we have no problem with time, ma'am. It all depends on your time, ma'am.
Oh, I see. Okay, okay. In that case, of course, the coming to this particular question, the environmental education itself, as I said, has been included both within the school education and higher education as an interdisciplinary subject. That is exactly what I was trying to tell, that let us say a student is taking up a core course of sociology, but has to talk or has to take up an emphasis or focus on environmental education. The institution should be able to allow that student to choose that option as an interdisciplinary course. Similarly, when teaching environmental education, the other way around, environmental education in terms of its linkages to social sciences or pure sciences or applied sciences or law or agriculture or health, these all areas, you could have pointers that are there in the curriculum. So what happens is, environmental education itself as a discipline is not just looking at an issue from only the lens of environment alone, but in terms of the lens that it sort of tries to bring about with the other areas or the other domains of learning. Say, for example, in terms of, let's say, somebody studying engineering, like Professor Mohan Menon was saying. So, somebody is studying electrical engineering. The kind of materials that you use in electrical engineering, how does it become environmental friendly? Or you say a civil engineering. All educational institutions, we say today, have to subscribe to Griha norms, like the green teacher. The building is a green building. So when you're talking about green building, how does a civil engineer look at it? That is environment there. Or when you're talking in terms of social issues, in terms of maybe, as I said, gender, or maybe any other aspect, how does environment come? A simple example that I was trying to give of drinking water being done, where as I said, usually it is the marginalized which faces the brunt of all this kind of thing. So NEP has allowed environmental education to be offered as a core discipline. And within that, as a core discipline, you can bring out the linkages. It can be offered as a interdisciplinary subject, where it can be a minor, where someone else's core discipline is some other subject. So the 4-year undergraduate curricula gives you this mix and match kind of options for all these possible combinations. Yeah, I think Rajesh has got disturbed with a phone call itself. So, Neetu Vineet, if I may go to the chat, how does
In fact, no problem, ma'am. I will do it. This is a question from our Deputy Director at RC Vadagara. Very
okay?
informative session. I request one clarification regarding the extent to which NEP 2020 addresses the urgent need for environmental education in urban areas compared to rural areas. And there is a second part to that, and how it can bridge the gap to ensure that all students receive equitable access to quality environmental education.
Okay. So both these questions, it's Pramila who's asked it, right? Dr.
Yes, ma'am.
Pramila. Yeah, good afternoon, Dr. Pramila, and happy to hear from you. The very pertinent questions. In a certain sense, see, the NEP is something that we visualize as a larger canvas that has given us an opportunity to explore these changes. Now, all curricular planning in a regular feature has to be taking place. Earlier, we used to say every 7 years, then it came down to 5 years. Now we say 3 years, and the speed with which lot of change is happening. And since curricular framing is not an easy exercise, the way in which we need to factor in new developments that come into the curricula has to be thought out by the institutions. Now, all higher education institutions are autonomous institutions. And while the UGC is only giving you a broad framework, or the AICT is giving you a broad framework, you have a lot in terms of being able to explore whether it is catering to urban areas or rural areas, what needs to be factored within that. Now, curriculum designing, our faculty are not looking at it. As I said, my appointment letter says I'm an assistant professor in such and such a discipline. I don't go beyond the fact that I go into a college and teach and walk out of that college. My role in framing a curricula or saying that this is a new area that we need to bring it in is not being explored. And there, I think the proactive role of the faculty, like Professor Menon was saying, becomes very important. That they come into making people aware that yes, environmental education is as much a curricula, because we don't have a curricula for urban area and rural area. Curricula remains a common, it depends on where the institution is located. But once you offer that as a curricula and it is seen whether it is being taken in by students in urban areas or rural areas, it all comes in. Now, how do you ensure equitable access? The question of affordability and ensuring that children can take up, I don't think whether it is equitable access even for a general. Am I audible to you?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah,
Perfectly.
yeah. Okay, okay. The question of equitable access to quality education is across the board. It doesn't really matter whether it is environment or whether you're learning civil engineering or you're learning mathematics or you're learning music or dance or whatever. It has to be fundamentally fundamentally a overarching goal. We have said in the NEP that every higher education institution makes an institutional development plan. I would say that sustainable development is one of the goals that we need to look at, and we have to ensure that every student has equitable access to quality education. It doesn't matter what type of institution it is. Now, within environmental education, there would be nothing, Dr. Pramila, that I would feel is distinguishing from, let's say, learning engineering or learning law. Every student has to get equitable access to quality education. And the question is of weaving in pedagogy, which is enriching, weaving in a very experiential form of learning, moving away from rote based learning to field surveys and activities, so that all children, and also when we introduce that we can offer it in regional languages, we are saying that we are breaking a language barrier, that we are not thinking that someone who articulates in English is better than someone who articulates in Malayalam or Tamil or Telugu or Gujarati or whatever. So there you are again providing a enabler which is there in the policy. And therefore I would urge Dr. Pramila to understand the canvas is large. NEP has provided some, let us say, inputs. Higher education institutions need to leverage that, and that needs to happen at a much larger scale, where faculty needs to play a more proactive role along with the community, which I mean the students and the parents and all coming together.
Thank you. Sir, would you like to add anything to this, or your thoughts?
You're talking to me?
Yes, sir.
No, I see. It's very rightly said that when it is not equity and quality is about anything that is being taught in the. But I one thing to add, that when we talk about outcomes of students, or even in IDP, institutional development plan, when we talk about what are we trying to achieve from the institution, we talk about learner achievement, that the outcome should be achieved. They should be able to. All of them should be successfully able to complete placement, etc. I think it would be required in the context of environment education. Has the institution made any difference in the community from the in the last 1 year? What sort of a difference in terms of the? Of course, it may not be able to talk in a global sense. A community which is in a rural situation, I mean, a college which is in a rural situation or in an urban situation. Can it very clearly say, no, this difference we really made in that, and that can be a real achievement of the institution. You may have to go into, I'm coming back to what I said earlier, environment education and sustainability is not a very smooth way of doing. I mean, there will always people to go against it. I mean, there will be always in the community who would say, no, this is not what is needed. We want, what will happen to our industry, what will happen to this, what will happen to that. Can the institution take a stand which is which is for sustainability, and fight it out? And will the governance, will the local governance allow that? I'm not sure whether our police will come and take them away, and we have to bring them back on bail. That these are things which I'm not telling you have to create law and order problem. It's not a law and order problem, but you can protest in your own way with your declarations, your statements, and from coming from the institution also. So quality actually would think, then only we can really say, yes, it has been of quality. Placement and achievement and all alone, that's one. And if this has to happen, I think the transaction, the pedagogy that Dr. Shakila was talking about, will have to change. And NEP has really talked about it. I mean, that we have always been telling that it should be a reflective, collaborative, reflective process that happens in the educational institution. We have to critically examine what's happening around you and come out with, and every subject will be able to make that interdisciplinary. It's not very difficult to, if you have a perspective to look at anything interdisciplinary. Anything can be made interdisciplinary, engineering or medicine, everything. They have the other disciplines coming in. So that's the role of the teacher also changes. The pedagogy may have to change. And the assessment and examination system also will change. Because if you have a pedagogy which encourages all this and finally asks 25 multiple choice questions at the end of the year and say they will tick and get marks, then there is no point. Students will know there is no point in going through this. That's it.
Thank you, sir. Then we have a question from Savarul Islam. NEP 2020, it is considered a landmark in climate governance, promoting collective action to address climate change. However, concerns remain about adequacy of commitments and implementation. I think it's more of a comment that is making.
Yes.
I feel, and
Yeah, it's more of a comment, and I think it applies universally that policies remain very aspirational documents sometimes, but on ground, the realistic implementation leaves much to be desired. However, I would always feel that being a positive thinker, I would always believe that even initial baby steps that we take should be a step in that direction.
yes.
Yeah.
Then we have a question from Ms. Soumya Srinivasan, and I think it is to you, ma'am. If we want to work on case studies, project ideas in sustainability, they don't permit us to teach subjects related to environmental studies. Kindly suggest if there is a platform for faculty.
No, I think Dr. Ms. Soumya, all institutions when taking up case studies, if it depends on an institution. If you're talking about a case study to be taken up, it is there as an opportunity within any higher education institution. But if you're talking about a specific area of environmental studies, then you must be looking at institutions which have full-fledged departments of environmental studies, because then only you would have the capacities for you to go forward doing it in environmental studies. Say for example, within environmental studies, which is a broad genus that you're talking about, suppose you're wanting to learn about, let's say, only petroleum as an energy, and then you should be looking at institutions which offer a department of petroleum or energy studies of that kind. So I don't think anyone tells us, or you can even look at CSIR. They have a lot of projects that they encourage. They have the Department of Science and Technology encourages taking that up. Have a look at their websites to see if they are inviting projects. Just as ICSSR invites mostly in social science research, CSIR, DBT, DST offer, if you are taking it up as an external project study, you can take it up separately. And like you have centers for environmental education, or you have TERI as a university, there are many such universities which can offer in that area. So I think you should explore that if conventional universities are not allowing you to do that.
There is a question from Neetu Vineet. What role does NEP 2020 envision for digital technologies in advancing environmental education, especially in remote and underserved areas?
Okay, so digital technologies, if we all know, when we created the community service centers, CSCs as we called it, and I'm talking about a time when I was in the planning commission, which is around 2006-7 or so. As early as that, I would remember that digital technologies were used for agriculturalists to understand about the climatic conditions, about the crop cycles, about the fertilizers and the pesticides that could be available, and so on. And common service centers were providing that because people did not have smartphones then. But today, digital technologies, because it's all become so much personalized handheld devices, these technologies and the number of apps that are available use it in terms of doing a lot in terms of environmental action. Like carrying forward what Professor Mohan Menon was saying, as an outcome, if you're looking at a college in a rural area, what is the social outreach of that college in terms of enhancing the quality of life of the community around it? So, say a simple example of a college here in Kerala itself, with where both Professor Mohan Menon and myself are associated. Instead of using the regular electricity bulbs, the LED bulbs, for example, going around doing a campaign of that kind. So, digital technologies, how you use it in terms of energy, solutions in terms of, let us say, solutions in terms of you cooking gas, in terms of many other things that impact, can be used by our institutions to sort of advance, particularly because of the social obligation and the social engagement that we should use technology so as to help the quality of life of people in unserved and underserved areas. So whether it is the fishermen folk, people living in coastal areas, people who are coming from agricultural backgrounds, people who are marginalized in terms of the kind of see, when California the fires took place, I think it was California, we were all concerned because it was the high and mighty whose houses were getting burnt. Whereas over here, you may have a lot of climatic events that are disrupting the lives of people. And I think using technology in terms of trying to understand how we can improve and how we can ameliorate the conditions of life of people in the rural areas is something that our educational institutions need to do more. It's a question of harmonizing. See, what Professor Menon is saying is reflecting of the fact that there is a lot of, let us say, conflict, but the need to harmonize is becoming very important. And you need to harmonize what seems apparently at divergence. So we think that development cannot harmonize with clean environment, and that is seeming to be opposite directions. So if you have the current US president talking about certain things which are completely disruptive by nature, we've got to live with that. There is no other way that we can deal with it. But the fact that as people, the collective force which talks about always, you will have solutions which are saner, which are pragmatic, and which makes a difference.
Uh, the next question is, how can NEP 2020's emphasis on critical thinking and problem solving skills be applied to teach children not just about environmental problems but also practical innovative solutions that can be implemented at local, regional, and national levels?
Yeah, so all efforts start at the institutional level. And whether it is a school or whether it is a college, at school, in fact, it becomes easier because people are taken out on educational tours and taken to visits to go ahead and understand things that happen on the field. How you go about it, like I was trying to tell you, do role plays, for example, as one of the ways. Make them do poster competitions. At coming to the middle school and maybe the secondary stage, you can have debates and discussions on issues. It has to be experiential, it has to be hands on. And in higher education, I think need to make them actually think in terms of going and talking to non governmental organizations, talking to community groups, creating communities of practice, uh, creating communities of practice in which students and teachers of an institution are an integral part of trying to actually arrive at solutions through analytical and critical and problem solving abilities. So the conventional way that you have multiple choice questions or you ask them to write an essay, these don't actually make you develop all those skills. And all these efforts which actually start at the grassroots level, at the institutional level, and adds on to the individual preparedness to discuss and deliberate and arrive at solutions. How many of us keep a track of what are happening in the COP meetings? How many of us, when teaching a subject, talk about playing a video of a COP discussion where students understand how nations come together and discuss it? Like Professor Mohan Menon was saying, it is not to merely have a discussion and leave it at that. The children need to understand, the students need to understand, the youth need to understand and develop youth leadership capacities so that they do that through problem solving and through through critical thinking and scientific temper and so on. So I think the very traditional ways in which we have transactions have not really given scope to any innovation. And these are all doable things. And it's not rocket science. It's a very simple change in approach to be able to do that. Go out into your own college, look at what is the harm that is being done. Is the grass drying? Why is it drying up? Like Professor Menon was telling us about the elephant coming into habitations. These are issues that we need children to study. And I think we are just talking about NEP in a larger context, but it is not really the NEP. It's about education in general. It's about the transformation in education to look at transforming lives of people around us.
Thank you, ma'am. There are, of course, other questions as well, but maybe because of the paucity of time, we will take it in another session or so. Definitely, the students are very much interested in the topic of discussion. That can be seen from the kind of comments that we are receiving, the questions as well. But
What I
of course,
can do, Rajesh, is if you share it with me, I can answer them back
okay.
to you, and you can then put it out to
Sure,
them in
sure.
their reading
That
resource.
will do, ma'am. Not a problem. And now I would request my colleagues to now chip in. Dr. Sindhu P. Nair is currently Senior Regional Director at IGNOU Regional Center, Vadagara. So, ma'am, why don't you come in?
Yes, Rajesh sir, thank you so much. Shakila ma'am, it has been very enriching and enlightening as always to listen to you, giving us the whole picture about the NEP and the environment education. Thank you very much for that. And you've taken us through the school education to the higher education in totality. And also the point that you told, to go beyond sensitivity of to actually field-oriented actions and not to keep policies as aspirational. So, in this regard, and adding up, when Mohan Menon sir was mentioning about the ground realities, it gave us the two sides of the aspects about the conflict and the harmony requirement. The live examples which Menon sir was also telling. It was nice to hear you, sir, after some long time as well. What just comes to my mind is that, when we know in higher education always, there is a policy and there is the action. So national education policy, no doubt, has been so comprehensive, so formulative in terms of various aspects, including environment education. One aspect is what I would like to know, ma'am. I'm less read about it, perhaps. Is that one side is the policy of NEP, and the other side we have in the higher education plane aspects such as the NAC and the NIRF, etc. So, how much integrated has it come into the overall picture? Because how much ever we keep saying that it is not just a thought; it has to result into action. And when there is a systemic compulsion built in, then there are people to take it up forward. So, to what extent has it actually translated into system embedded aspects of the NAC or the NIRF? If you could kindly throw some light upon, because so that's where action perhaps may actually result in from education institutions and across to students. And perhaps one thought I was just coming to my mind here, that if students are doing some projects, shouldn't there be some way where they're doing a project where environment is also studied as an aspect in any discipline? There is some credit given to that in terms of the marks or something. So some kind of such inbuilt mechanisms also is just a little off aspect. But generally, how NAC and NIRF has actually taken this NEP 2020 forward since the implementation of this policy. Thank you.
Avish, you would like me to respond, or we'll have our other friend Jalaja Kumari and then we can respond?
I think we will take Jalja ma'am's views also, and finally maybe both of you can respond. Ma'am,
I
Jalja
ask that because I don't speak very brief. That is my problem.
no problem, absolutely no problem, madam. The time is all yours. Absolutely, we are privileged to hear from eminent experts like you and Mohan Menon sir. So always a privilege. Jalja madam, once again let me introduce ma'am. Madam is the regional director at IGNOU Regional Center IZone. She joined that center a year back.
Yeah.
So ma'am, kindly join in and give your views on this subject.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Good afternoon to all education veterans, I think. Because Mohan sir and Shakila madam is there. Actually, I didn't get the opportunity to hear ma'am's words because I was in an orientation program. It was for last 6 days, and immediately after the valedictory function, I was skipping into and I was joining here. Actually, I didn't hear, but the further discussions and contributions from ma'am itself and sir, Mohan Menon sir, I was getting something, I was thinking something, and so many aspects were coming into my mind regarding NEP itself. So actually, I think the beauty of our program, this environmental sustainability certificate program, is that in nature itself, it is interdisciplinary. That is the beauty, I think, because we were directly speaking about environmental education, environmental technology, society and environment, and environmental jurisprudence, law, and everything. So whatever we are telling, that will be in touch with all these aspects. And ma'am was also telling how engineering, chemistry, and the other disciplines comes interrelated with environmental education and environmental sustainability. Actually, this environmental science or environmental studies or sustainability of environment, this is the most broad field, I think, because whatever we are touching, whatever we are dealing, the impact will be on environment only. Even in our personal life. That is what I was working on a topic, that domestic environmentalism. Because whatever we are doing in our life, that is highly related to environment, and the impact of our activities will be there, visibly seen. That is there. So when we are connecting with these pedagogical aspects, students may be taught within their localities and habitat. That is what I am thinking. If we are studying something from another country, another another state, wherever we are living, our studies and our thoughts should be related to the nearest environment. That type of one pedagogical approach has to be implemented in the field of education. That's what I always feel. We call it a habitat resource model. We have written that particular model in our course also. Habitat resource model, always teaching and giving experiences and training to the students to view or to observe their surroundings and how to behave, even at home. That's what domestic environmentalism. Whenever we are doing something at home, find out the relation between our activities and environmental impact. So it will give them a habitual learning opportunity. So this is when our study habits becomes outside the life, outside the life patterns. It is only formal. That is what the systemic problems, the madam was telling, that the systemic issues are there. We are always for ranking, we are always for that type of things. That is the systemic bias and systemic barriers we are experiencing. But life should be the final outcome. That is what outcome based learning. And wherever we go, we will be able to behave in such an environmentally benign manner, or environmental friendliness will be there. If we are spitting somewhere, immediately that thought should come. This should not be done. But what we are thinking, nobody is seeing, so we can do. This is what the attitude. So the attitudinal changes always occur through habitat resource model way of learning and this domestic environmentalism. Domestic environmentalism is always giving an opportunity to the students or the family members to behave in a group. And the pedagogical experiences, that is an informal pedagogical experience that may be contributed from all the family members. That becomes, finally, that will be a behavioral pattern, and this is what we always tell, a habitual knowledge. So all this way we can convert to some extent our attitude, our environmental sustainability measures, I think, like that. And when NEP focuses on languages, I think to show the integration of regionalism and other matters, it will it will be effective. But when we are focusing on literature, means regional literature, the contribution will be more than just studying the languages, I think. So literature and philosophy, it always helps us to do something, especially Indian knowledge system. Nowadays, people are thinking that Indian knowledge system is Rudraksha or Jada. That is what the problem. So Indian knowledge system should not be for politicizing or political marketing. That is the problem. But in olden days, everywhere, I think in around the household surroundings, there was carver. It's a small forest habitat situation. It is, isn't it? Such an ecosystem was there. So people were studying, they were learning to how to love the surroundings, how to love the other animals. Symbiosis were there. Now, sir was telling about the human-animal conflict and all. So we should not disturb the ecosystem of the other living beings. Bashir was writing as the rightful inhabitants of the earth. They have the primordial rights, but we are violating. We are thinking that the earth is for human being only. So that type of Indian knowledge system, they were loving rivers, they were loving forests, and we were living for the nature. When we are cutting the trees, we will ask permission. It is for that work that was done only for the needs of the people, not for the satisfaction of the greed. So need versus greed. This way things are going on. That is the core of Indian knowledge system, I believe. That Indian knowledge system has to be integrated with education. Then this environmental sustainability will come. So this way, a lot of things are there. If we are telling that once there was a river, nothing is needed further. A feeling will come to the mind of the people regarding the current situations of the river. This is what the impact of literature. So this way, we have to integrate education for an outcome-based learning. I'm not asking any question. No question is coming immediately because I was not listening ma'am's talk. But so many thoughts came. I was just sharing that, and that's all, ma'am. Nothing else.
Thank you, ma'am. I think now we can go to the final responses of both our experts. Shakila, ma'am.
Yeah, so I'll just respond to what Dr. Sindhu was asking. I would say that NAC has, in a certain sense, aligned itself to NEP because, in a certain sense, they do, in the requisite formats, require institutions to show that they are actually implementing the recommendations of NEP. And therefore institutions try to adhere to that. At a personal level, I am just saying no one can point a gun to someone and say you need to implement NEP. That's not the way to go around it. It has to be something internalized, and you need to sort of accept that some of the recommendations are doable, and therefore that it goes. But NAC, of course, has been doing. NIRF, in a certain sense, as of now, I do not think, because you see what NIRF does is it categorizes pharmacy or universities and technology and so on. That goes against, in a certain sense, the spirit of what we talk about multidisciplinarity. So you need to have a different rubrics or a different kind of a matrix to assess institutions. But I think if you sort of de-link that in terms of with a certain caveat, which tells us that it is not fair to compare apples and oranges. So when you put it all together to look at multidisciplinarity, what might necessarily happen is many of the very top ranked centrally funded institutions might take that piece of cake and walk away, and then you don't have state institutions or institutions in other domains coming up. So to put that, I am trying to tell you both what is pro and what is the devil's advocate also. that why it may not be so easy to talk about NIRF being aligned in that manner. But NAC, yes, they have already done that because they are asking for it. All that NIRF has done is that for getting any funding under the centrally sponsored scheme of what we called earlier as RUSA, now being called as PM Usha, they talk about for PM Usha funding, you need to have multidisciplinarity. So multidisciplinarity, therefore, is a sort of an indicator which carries weightage, but though the categorization in the ranking still remains discipline specific and therefore is not NEP aligned.
Madam, in fact, I have one question from one of our assistant regional directors, Shashi Kumar. He has put it in my WhatsApp. If you could kindly address that also, both of you, it would be great. How does NEP 2020 ensure that tribal children receive culturally sensitive environmental education that incorporates their traditional ecological knowledge while preparing them for modern environmental challenges? This is the question that I received on chat.
Okay. So, on our committee, we had Professor T.V. Kattimani. He is a person who comes with a background relating to tribal knowledges. And when we talked about uh, teachers, talked about schools in tribal areas, we were concerned about the fact that these schools do not actually have access to languages, but mostly they have dialects. And therefore, the need of engaging people from the community to look at, the comprehension ability of a given language vis-a-vis a dialect using the local resources has been one aspect of it. Other than that, of course, the indigenous knowledges, including this whole idea in terms of these 10 days bagless for the school days between class 6 and 8, was basically an effort to really take children in these areas to understand about tribal indigenous knowledges. And therefore, depending on the location of a given school, they should be able to do that. The idea also was in terms of having diversity being understood in terms of students being made aware that tribal sections of the society have different forms of, let us say, dialect, the folk art, the various forms of, let's say, food habits, various things that are very different from the general rural population. So I think that nuanced factor has also been reflected in the national curriculum framework for the school education, and is also being reflected to some extent in the training programs that are being looked at for the school teachers. Of course, at the higher education level, you only have centers that deal with tribal studies, not really, and they are still, sadly to say, not really integrated along with the other departments, which I think can happen only if we have a more open approach to diversity in the in the departmental approaches to deal with that kind of aspects of tribal knowledge systems. Of course, IKS to one extent captures it, but that doesn't do full justice to indigenous knowledge alone, because indigenous knowledge systems have got itself into certain buckets. But indigenous knowledge, particularly from the point of view of tribals and the number of tribal populations and the way these tribal systems have, like you have the tribal universities. See, IGNTU was there in Amarkantak, then we thought in terms of Andhra Pradesh and Telangana getting separate, then we gave both of them tribal universities. But those are not just efforts, and you cannot have tribal universities being the only ones looking at tribal studies and so on. It should be broad based. That, of course, there is a possibility under NEP, but much more needs to be done on that front.
Thank you, madam. Thank you. I think we can now move on to Mohan Menon sir's comments on these matters.
Yeah, I would like to make a general observation regarding the transformation that we are trying to make in the country, very ably guided by the national education policy. In fact, it is a surely a very it's a landmark because for the first time, 66 pages, as Dr. Shakila said, document has tried to capture the various things that in a country like ours, um, where diversity is so much. We talked about tribals just now. To into that is really remarkable. There is no doubt about it. Absolutely. But along with that, it's also important that a document like that cannot not, and rather I would say even should not go into the micro level changes that one would think in such a diverse country like ours. Obviously, if we try to do that, that will not be a very successful thing, because micro level you say, have we achieved this? Have we achieved this? Have we achieved this? It we will not be able to achieve. I would even think that the national policy itself may be revisited according to the experience that we are getting in since it came from 2020. Incidentally, 2020, when the first draft I read about in 20 just before or 2020, I think, just at the time when COVID was up, and I found some changes were made after that just because of COVID. The COVID made the difference, especially in the technology area, distance education area. I was so happy that agencies which were not for that much for distance education and online and all these, which are happen to be my areas of concern. Suddenly, the NEP came out with that, and after that, they have changed their colors very happily. I mean, I am so happy because I have been dealing with institutions like NCT, agency like NCT, which were somehow had a enmity coming from the last birth, sort of thing. They had against distance education. I don't know how that they got, but this is what they had. But they changed. They have changed. Today they say that you can have 20% or 30% of courses which is done by etc. etc. So what I'm trying to say is, India has really done that. I mean, certain opened the eyes of many of these agencies, which is a very plus point, partly due to COVID. I would also give that to COVID, because we experienced a shocking experience we had at that time, and NEP learned by that. So NEP should learn further, I won't say, because transformation cannot happen in a short while, because we are attempting transformation. If it is only a transition that NEP is trying to achieve, it will be easier. That is the reason that you find that all are not aligned. Everybody is following NEP, because every time they will be asked, the NCT will be asked, are you following NEP? They will say, yeah, they are following. UGC will also be asked. All are individually asked. When we were having this committee for teacher education, we found some of the recommendations of the UGC was not taken into account by NCT. Like how the multidisciplinary institutions, the transformation can be, they were not ready to accept, but UGC has come out with it. But this, I'm not criticizing that. This is a natural process. What I'm trying to say is, this is a natural process of equilibrium. In physics, those who have done will understand that, you go into a dynamics and then it leads to an equilibrium after some time. That equilibrium will happen only after a few years. For the scope of the NEP, that will surely happen, and that is natural. I only wish that there will not be undue pressure on the states to implement this, that why you have not done, money will not send from center and all. That will create a problem, actually, which is political. I understand, which you and I cannot change. I understand that. But that is not going to be very healthy for the transformation that we are going to achieve. So that's why let's probably, if we re-examine after 5 years, things might be, and all this is happening in a federal state. When there is a union government as well as a state government, the education is in the concurrent list. So that is creating problem. Even in terms of, forget about politics, because the party politics, they will fight talking about it, that's fine. I mean, let them do that. But even in terms of implementation, many of the things that we have thought of probably at a sitting on the table in Delhi may not be able to really solve the problems in some places. So just go through that process. That's what I mean. I'm very hopeful that the major changes will happen. And the 4-year undergraduate program, I really initiated that sort of a change in the higher education. I think, although some of the questions I didn't respond to at that time, but then many of the things related to that environmental education, how will it help digital learning, all these have answers in the way that the 4-year undergraduate program have been implemented. I was quite closely associated with the MG University implementation and the freedom. Somebody asked that question, how can we decide that we can have this course? Yes, you can decide. It has that freedom even at the institutional level. The MG University has given at institutional level, you want to go for such a thing, you go for it. I mean, not just environmental education, it could be anything else also, according to the context, according to the situation. So there are a lot of plus points, things are happening. But maybe it will take more time. That's my view.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. We'll all agree that this was a very rich discussion that we had today. And we were extremely fortunate that we had two very eminent experts in this field. One of the experts had directly been involved in the process of drafting the NEP. So no one can give a perspective better than the horse himself or herself. So that is the advantage that we had today on the one hand. And Mohan Menon sir, as always, gives the pictures from both the sides. And that way, sir has always given perspectives into diverse angles from which a issue can be looked at. So both these have been very, very important for the discussion today. And I'm sure our students who have been viewing this program right now, and more of them who will be viewing later on, because 98% of the students who have joined this course are working people. So they will not be, I'm sure they would not have joined at this time, but they'll be viewing this session later at their leisure in the evening. And because this is a compulsory part of their course even. So in the final exam also, there will be questions from this particular video also. So they will definitely be viewing this later at their leisure and when they get time. And they will also be getting back to us with their comments, questions, queries, etc., or our email and our other communication channels. So it is an ongoing process. And what we have been doing all through these years, we started this course in 2018. And let me put on record that this is one of those courses which has enjoyed relatively good success and good following all through these years without any dilution in the student following. A lot of students from a lot of universities have taken it for credit transfer as well. So that way we have been lucky to have a continuous flow of encouragement from the student community as well. So it is not just for one session that we preserve this recording. It is for all subsequent sessions till the runs that this particular recording will be there, and many more generations of students will be benefiting from the discussion that we had today. I am extremely thankful for the eminent presence of Dr. Shakila ma'am. I know Madam has a very busy schedule all throughout the year, but in spite of that, Madam has been kind enough to allot some time out of her very busy schedule. Not only allot time, but also give us perspectives on this very important area, that is environmental education and the new education policy. And not only that, she has also been kind enough to reply to all the questions and queries, a huge number of them, which has come. And the explanation has been lucid and crystal clear. So we all have enjoyed the kind of discussion that we had today, ma'am. Thank you once again on behalf of the team of the Certificate in Environmental Sustainability, as well as from IGNOU Regional Center Trivandrum for coming to this program and also giving us such vibrant and exquisite views on this very important area, ma'am. And we will be getting in touch again and again with you, and we'll be, I'm sure we will all be lucky to have your presence in future as well, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Mohan Menon, sir, I do not know how to thank you, not only for this session, but also for the continuous encouragement that you have been giving us all these years, right from the beginning of the course till now, every now and then, whenever we had any doubt or any discussion to be conducted, sir was the first point of reference for us. We always would run to sir and say, sir, you have to come on this day. And sir never ever said no to our request. That is one of the best things about sir. And sir also has this huge experience, national and international, which goes along with his profile. And that is a great benefit for all of us, because when we talk about education, environmental education, and things related generally to environment as such, this international perspective is of great importance. So he has worked in institutions not only under the banner of UN, but also under the banner of Commonwealth of Learning, also at Wawasan University, Malaysia. And his association with all these diverse institutions have given him a perspective which is quite different from the mainstream perspective that we have in India normally. So we have greatly benefited this course, and even otherwise, all of us personally have also greatly benefited from sir's vast repertoire of knowledge. And I'm sure, as I just told madam, we will also be benefiting in future from your presence for various programs and other things, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you once again for accepting our request. And I cannot forget the contribution of my colleagues at IGNOU. Now, at one point in time, we were all at IGNOU Regional Center, Cochin, but now we have been dispersed. Sindhu madam has occupied the chair, which I fondly occupied at Vadagara for around, I was there for around 6 years. And madam has been very cooperative and very supportive of all the efforts that we take to make this course a success. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. As always, your presence is greatly appreciated, and it is much needed as well. Thank you, ma'am, for your presence. And Jalajamari, ma'am, of course, now she is been shifted to a far-off place. Of course, geography-wise, the distance is too far, but as far as her involvement and as far as her approach to environmental sustainability and the course is concerned, it is very as proximate as ever. In fact, madam is also the moderator for this program, and therefore it is of great advantage that that we have madam's presence for this program. And always madam has been very willing to give us all the support as and when required for not only running this course, but also for all the other activities related to any academic activity that we may take from time to time. Madam, your presence today is also greatly appreciated, and we are very thankful for taking time out of your very busy schedule. In spite of you having a training program today, you have joined us for this program. Thank you once again for your presence, ma'am. And I also thank all our students and staff members and all participants from diverse walks of life who have not only joined this session today, but have also been very, very proactive, and they have been asking lots and lots of questions, putting lots of comments, and definitely we'll be keeping in touch with you. Thank you, one and all, and thank you for all for making this session really, really exciting. Thank you, one and all.
Thank you, Dr. Rajesh, Professor Mohan Menon, and Prasita,
Thank you.
Sindhu and Jarjakumari. I think Prasita was